Let's explore the movement away to joy and back to joy. So we begin, as always, with the one. And in the one, there is no distinction. There's an interconnected ecology. And the break from the one occurs in the descent into language, which is the descent into duality. With duality, we have us and them. We have I and thou. We have good and bad. We have male and female. And we have black and white. Now, a scientific assessment of duality and polarity is always that they are equal. If you cut the one in half, which is the articulation of a polarity, you now have two halves. And if you ask a scientist to measure one half and compare it to the other half, by definition, they are the same. By definition, all polarities are interdependent upon one another because they are defined by one another and often created by one another, as in the polarity of male and female. Men are created by women, and women are created by men. You take away the woman, there is no man. You take away the man, and there can be no woman. In a polarity, you always have innate equality. However, the cultural lens, which is an intermediary between observation and reality, can have many filters, many programs that distort the innate awareness of equality and interconnectedness of all things. As we move into distinction with the knife of language, we create the experiential perception of isolation, of distinction, of disintegration, and ultimately of loneliness. And we descend from joy. We descend from joy by immersing more and more of us into the awareness of separate, particulate consciousness. We create human consciousness, and we descend out of joy. And what we create for ourselves is an oasis called identity. And the identity is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we recognize, recreate, and use to define I. That's why it's an I identity as opposed to a we identity or a group identity. The I identity says that this is me. And we recognize, reassemble the awareness of I as we remember, put the members of the identity back together as we reassemble the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we knew before. For it to be a pattern, it has to be a dominant loop. It has to be repeated. And so when we get shocked, dissociated, disoriented, traumatized, we try and find ourselves. And this is one of the crises of severe trauma, is the identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being after a severe trauma is completely different. The identity is unrecognizable. And part of the trauma, the secondary wave of trauma, is I can no longer find myself, my I. I can't find my identity because the energy mass that has collided with the identity that I identify with is so big that it ruptures all of the familiar family, the family pattern. And why is our identity, our identity, so familiar? Because as a child, we wholesale import the identity of the family, which is often a fractal representation of the culture. We import the identity from the family, so it is familiar. And the family imports the identity from the culture because it's tried and not true, but it is tried and survivable, and because it is efficient. It is efficient to participate in a group dynamic. It's efficient for the group if we copy them and do what is expected. And it is efficient for us if we belong and are accepted in the group. Our survival and security, our need for survival and security go up as a probability field if we are accepted in infancy, in childhood, and to some extent in adolescence. So we form the little bubble of our identity, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, borrowing heavily from the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being of our culture. And the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being as a member of a Western culture is one of fragmentation, dissociation, thinking without feeling, thinking often without doing, defining ourselves based on our politics, our beliefs, rather than defining ourselves by our body shape, which is an equally valid basis, but a much more cohesive basis. If we define ourselves as that one with a nose and ears, we will feel very close to other humans. as we define ourselves as that one who thinks this thought in this way for this reason, we will be completely unique, because there will never be another human being who exhibits the exact same mental identity for the same reasons, to the same intensities, in the same way. And so we move into isolation, into the technology of language, and into despair that we will ever reconnect and find ourselves within the one, into loneliness at being separate from what is. Into distinction. No one is like me, and therefore no one fully understands me. And with it, the longing to be understood, to be seen, to be connected to by something familiar. And yet, identifying, possessing, attaching ourselves to the identity, to the pattern, defining ourselves by our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. We feel threatened. We feel afraid. We feel traumatized by the endless waves of energy moving towards us from the other regions of our interconnected ecology. Ecology teaches us that our fingernail has something in common with Mars, that our skin has something in common with Pluto, that every part of every part is interconnected on multiple dimensions. The dimension of gravity is a shared pattern. The identity of electromagnetic energy is a shared pattern. The identity of space connects all things. The identity of time connects all things. By definition, because in our narrative we say that all things were born out of, were emerged out of the Big Bang, the original moment. That there was an original moment that connected all things. And the moment got bigger and bigger and bigger. And with it, space and time expanded to include more and more of its children, until here we are, a child of time and space, connected as relatives to every other pattern of energy that has ever been and will ever be in the possibility field that is time and space. All things are linked. And you can think of the fragility of a possibility field. What is a possibility field? It contains everything that you can imagine and so much more. But if one little piece goes missing, if one little stitch in the thread of the possibility field is removed, like a sweater, the entire field becomes unraveled. You can't have a circle with 1 degree missing. You can't have a possibility field without you. You are inside the possibility field. And in order for the possibility field to be complete, you must exist, as must every other thing in the possibility field. Which means that all possibilities are connected as stitches in the weave that is the possibility fabric. Now, joy is where it has always been, in the ineffable, in the transcendent, beyond language. Language can point to it, up, 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 up. And then language cannot follow transcendent states of joy into their existence. We can go there, but by the time we return to the pattern organizing brain that is our rational mind, the one that composes language and articulates patterns, that which is beyond language cannot fit into the language of the rational brain. But transcendent joy exists all around us. And in the fear of losing our self, losing our identity, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, in the fear of losing our identity, we are at war with the unknown through the vehicle of fear. The greatest human fear is dread at the edge of identity, at the edge of the known. Because beyond identity, beyond a known pattern of remembered thoughts, feelings, words, actions, and ways of being, there is no certainty, there's no language. And when we fear ourself, we fear the larger self, the ecology we are a part of. And we do not trust the dissolving of one identity to lead us into another. And in that terror, the event that collides and shatters the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, that event is a traumatic event, where a part of us, a part of the reality that is bigger than us, that is bigger than the identity we use to define ourselves, collides with the identity And the larger self, the other, the unknown, by definition, is 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times greater, bigger, more intense than the known. The ecology is bigger than the identity. The unknown is bigger than the known. The unconscious self is bigger than the self. And here we are, lost in an identity, defining ourselves as something that will no longer exist if we cannot recognize who we have become. So we cling to our pattern, the pattern that keeps us separate, the pattern that makes us lonely, the pattern that we are afraid of losing in death, in trauma, in change. And yet joy awaits us in the transcendent regions of the brain, on the other side of death, the transcendent world of beauty awaits us beyond language, beyond the patterns we use to define, to delineate who we are. We are not the pattern. We are the one who watches. We are not the identity. We are the witness. We are the possibility field out of which all identity, painful and joyful, happy and sad, red and yellow, black and white, emerge. And like lines in a dream, we wash them all away. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.